podcast by teens for teens. Teenish.
Stay connected with Michael and I on social media.
Follow the Teenish Podcast on Instagram at Teenish Podcast.
And like our Facebook page at Teenish. Michael and I can also be found on YouTube at the Teenish Podcast, where you can find interactive videos of our podcast episodes.
We hope you can join our growing social media community. Hi, welcome back to Teenish. Today, me and Gene are going to be talking about the effects of gaming on teens and our personal experiences with gaming. I know I'm pretty sure I have a lot more to talk about than you do as far as experience-wise on games.
Although my experience may be limited, I do have some things to say about gaming and the way that it affects us. In particular, the way that it affects our brain and the way that it affects our day-to-day actions that we do. But I really don't play video games, and I really don't have an interest in playing video games just because I have other things in my life that I put like on a higher standards than video games, and people can argue otherwise. But just like I love music, so you'll see me playing my trumpet more than you'll see me on my computer playing games. So everyone has their priorities.
Yeah, me personally, I wouldn't consider gaming a priority, but I do it quite often.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say I spend about, in between an hour to 2 hours of gaming a day. There are days where I don't game at all, but...
So yeah, like in my opinion, like that's a lot of time that you're just spending watching a TV, not moving at all, while rather me and not a lot of people, but I'll speak for me and people that don't really game. I just don't have an interest in it, and I'd rather be outside running, lifting weights at the gym, rather than just watch. I don't see a benefit from playing video games, in my opinion. Like, we're just sitting down watching the TV, and benefits that you can attribute to and name right now, that's benefits that I don't see. I mean, of course, I know there's benefits by partaking and playing.
Well, that's what we're going to be talking about in this podcast. Some positives and negatives moving forward from this. I personally did not realize how many positives there were to gaming before researching for this podcast.
Yeah. And so some of the positives can be attributed to knowing how to play video games better also. So that's when we get into it, you'll see okay, well, we know hand-eye coordination, which can be attributed, and you can use that for other things. Like if you want to go be a surgeon, if you want to go into the military, these are things that will help us. But then there becomes a line where it's okay, well, am I doing this for too long? Do I have other things that I could be doing right now? Or is this what I want to do as a career? This will be building up what I want to do in my future. So there's a line that can be drawn with I will benefit from this, or I just won't benefit from this. And that's up to the person, and that's up for us to make that determination ourselves.
Yeah, there's definitely both a positive and negative effect that video games can have on a person. I also think it depends on the type of game that it is. You would benefit more, in my opinion, from a strategy-based game or a skilled-based game compared to a shoot-'em-up.
Yeah, and I think that the type of game that somebody picks can say a lot about them, but it also says a lot about their interest. So for me, if I were to play a video game, it would either be a racing game, a game that is revolved around sports, or a one-person game that is just allows the person to just roam around a city.
You would say more of a simulator type game.
To a certain extent.
Simulation.
Not like Sims.
No, not like Sims. I'm saying a simulation is in more of a GTA.
Saint Rose game like that.
Saint Rose game,
yeah,
exactly.
Because I can drive.
Exactly.
I can go be nosy. It's a fun game because mostly it's just the driving. That's what interests me. So I can play a NASCAR game, or I can play airplane games and stuff like that.
Yeah, I remember back in the day you used to play that
I'll play
airplane game on
like
the
that.
computer.
Yeah, but the game has to be something that I'm related to something I'm interested to. That doesn't mean like I don't want to play shooting games. Like of course I'm very interested in playing those games, but it's just like at my house right now, I have no gaming systems. I don't have. I mean, I can go on the internet and play a racing game, but I don't have those systems because I'm not like interested enough to like, okay, well, let me get a system. Let me connect that to my TV while I can just go to your house or go to friends' houses and play their video games for like a couple hours, but I don't have to be invested into it because I'm not that invested into it to have my own gaming systems.
You got a good point. And from my perspective, I do have a console. I do play video games relatively frequently.
Mm-hmm.
But I also do. It does matter what video games I partake in.
Yeah.
Like I would partake in more of a physical, wrestling, MMA.
Yeah, and that's
or storyline driven.
And because you're interested in stuff like that.
Because I'm interested in that.
Yeah, and so I think that you have to find, by seeing the type of games that somebody plays represents like what they can really attribute to in life. So for you love wrestling, you love like fighting, MMA, boxing, stuff like that. You watch that on TV. So that's the reason why you're interested in like, okay, well, I got to learn these moves, or, oh, let me see what I did on TV. Let me simulate that on this game. While for me, it was like I have an interest in airplanes. I have an interest in driving cars. So that's why, or I have an interest in just seeing the car go around and around. So that's the reason why those are my interests. And so the interest can be attributed to what we really play on TV. So, yeah.
So with that being said, do you want to get into some of those pros and cons of gaming?
Yeah. And like in the beginning, seems like I have a lot of negatives with video games, but as we will see that there are a lot of positives to video gaming in general.
Yeah, like I said, when we were going into researching this, I was expecting nothing but negatives.
Well,
and it completely shocked me of how many positives there are for gaming. I'm not saying that there are not negatives, because there definitely are.
And I knew that there were a lot of positives, especially on a cognitive level in general. I knew that there is something that can be positive from these companies making multi-millions of dollars. So there's a reason why people are interested in video gaming, but then we will also talk about how it can be like detrimental to somebody and even go to an extent of having an addiction to video games.
Oh yes, we're going to get into a lot about video gaming and media addictions further on in this podcast.
All right, so a positive that somebody can see with like playing video games and being involved in video games, one thing is to have like increased or improved cognitive function. So that's going from reasoning, perception, memory. You got to think about it. Some of these games, you have to remember what buttons to press, or to remember that you have to do this at this time and do that at this time. And it also harnesses your attention. And so you have like, you have practice at being like attentive about something. So you're sitting down, you're processing what you see and stuff like that. So you have like, you can sit down, and I've sat down, played 20 minutes games, an hour a game, 2 hours games. So if you can sit down, it shows that you can possibly sit down and take a 2-hour test and still be interested in something, or listen to a lecture for 2 hours.
It shows that it can help with your visual processing and your perception of things, especially like from a testing standpoint, from a long time sitting, just staring at something.
Yeah. Another positive with playing video games can also be hand-eye coordination. So you're actually learning how to not look at the controller. So this can help in a lot of ways. But for examples, when players need to keep track of their positions, their speed, their aim, and direction, the brain processes things differently. So when we're holding the controllers and we're watching the TV, most of the time you don't look at your hands, right?
Right. And this actually really helps with typing, because in the day-to-day life, you're probably going to have to type, and chances are you might have to do it really fast, and you might not be able to look at what you're typing.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I look at what I'm typing. Personally,
I do too. I cannot.
Yeah, but I still do have like not a high words per minute, but I don't have a low words per minute like some people do. So
I'm really bad, just genuinely really bad.
Yeah, but hand-eye coordination is something that you can really use a lot in life, especially depending on what career path you want to go into.
Yeah, because like sports in particular, oh my gosh, hand-eye coordination, anything involving a ball, you need to have hand-eye coordination for.
Yeah, and even in music, playing the trumpet, you have to look at the music. You have to also know what valves to press to play what note. If you're doing playing piano, you got to know what notes to hit by what you're looking at on the music. So hand-eye coordination you can attribute hand-eye coordination to a lot of things in life, and those are some things.
Another thing that is great about video games, especially action video games, is quick thinking and accuracy. Action video games prepare gamers to make smart decisions in a split second. These are actual things that you could also use towards life in decision-making processing.
Yeah, and think about self-defense. You have to think quickly, and you have to also know, like, okay, well, if I'm trying to hit their face, let me make sure I aim somewhere near their face to protect myself. And so think about how you get a positive from playing video games to being able to protect yourself or for self-defense.
Yeah. Anything involving urgency, really. This is, especially tests, even tests.
Another positive that can come from playing video games is it allows for your dexterity to be improved. So online gaming improves the movement of our hands with like the mouse and keyboard, and this relates a lot to hand-eye coordination. But just like when you're on the keyboard, you need to learn like how to use the shortcuts and how to get faster responses on instead of doing like processes very long. So for your wrestling game, you'll know how to punch somebody, you'll know how to run or how to do a backflip. So you're working on your dexterity by learning different shortcuts that you can get a task done. And like for me, when I'm writing a project on Word or even editing this podcast, that's something that I have to do is have to work on how am I going to make this process faster by doing different shortcuts or doing different functions and movements with my hand and my mouse and keyboard to aid in this process of editing or aid in this process of working on schoolwork.
And I'm sure to some point that helps with memorization skills as well.
And it surely does. And also, it allows for quick thinking and accuracy on my behalf, and especially on your behalf too when you're playing your video games. And so, seeing how all of these positives, as we are just getting into the positives, how they can all be attributed to each other. That shows like how that these positives are rolling over. And so that's something good to see.
All right, the next positive is problem-solving abilities. Role-playing games can help adolescents with the problem-solving. Whenever you get into a problem, it'll teach you how to easily find a way to solve it.
Yeah, and some video games can also improve your mood, and then also ward off anxiety. So let's say you have a problem that arises in your life, and one of the video games that you have, like it teaches you how to like ward off anxiety by so like an example is Sims. So I know that you have to take care of like animals in Sims, correct?
I believe so.
Or you learn like different traits on how to like, okay, well I know I gotta feed the dog, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. And so when you're problem solving on TV or when it's played out and simulated, so you know that you'll see a positive and you'll see a reward right after that. That also helps instill like traits of like learning how to respond to things that may go wrong in your life. And so it allows for straightforward and instant happiness and relaxation to happen while playing games.
This can also happen with games like Free Flow or Candy Crush that, takes away, whenever you focus on it, you can then relax and ease yourself into a calmer state.
Yeah. And so just like this is a reason why like casinos, why they do so good is because it's instant gratification. you put the little penny in the slot, cha-ching, 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 and then you'll always hear somebody winning something. It can be $10, but you'll hear somebody winning something and you'll hear them being like yelling. And so hearing that gratification and seeing the gratification allows for fundamental emotional benefits of the teens. And that's one of the reasons why you'll see later why it can be addicting and why many people turn to video games for help or for increased emotional support. Playing video games can also increase intelligence that a teen may have or that a teen may be exposed to. So teens who are encouraged and are praised for like working on a puzzle or a game develop an idea of progressive knowledge, which essentially is believing that intelligence is not fixed nor can it be improved. It can also grow with time and also effort while working at it. And so this way, video games provide an ideal grounds for students to acquire their traits and thoughts. So wrestling, you want to go, I know in the past that you were interested in going into wrestling field or something like that.
I'm just interested in the sports entertainment,
in general,
marketing. I'm all up in that, regardless of whether it's wrestling or MMA or just sporting, period. I'm very interested in the marketing field. But wrestling, I can honestly say, was the biggest thing that got me into that. And I'm sure that video games have actually helped me maintain my love for wrestling.
Yeah, and you also learn things that you might have not learned by not playing the video games about wrestling.
Oh, yes, very much so.
Yeah, and so that's what that really is talking about. It's talking about like how your education will continue to grow when playing games like this, or even if it may be very minute, or like, oh wow, I didn't even know that cool fact about the United States by playing this video game. And so the positives of video games were explained, and we can see how they all can relate to each other. But now we're going to move on to the negative effects. And the bad effects of video games are mostly related to the amount of time that the kids are playing the game, and then also the content that the game is related to.
Yes, like the biggest point of the negatives that we can possibly get into is aggression in teens.
Yeah, definitely.
Due to gaming. Those games being violent, like Grand Theft Auto, those games being shoot 'em up games like Call of Duty. Just it makes people's behaviors change the more and more you play it. Like if you play it for less than an hour or maybe even an hour a day, that's not going to have as big of an effect on you as it would be if you play it for a long period of time.
Yeah, and some researchers have even claimed that violent video games can desensitize children to violence and lower their likelihood to a pro-social behavior. So think about it, that playing these shooting games can desensitize students to hearing gunshots and to even ward students off about talking about violence in general. And so just think about how just the type of game that a child plays can affect the way that they are seen as or are regarded to in society.
Yeah, it could very well change their mental stability and their well-being.
Yeah. And when playing video games, you'll see a lot of people say, oh, I'm addicted to video gaming, or I want to play right now, or something like that. But addiction to gaming is real. It is actually something that is named addiction to gaming, and the term is called pathological gaming, but it can also be referred to as video game addiction. But it has been widely discussed in the medical fields, and then but it is not yet classified within the DSM, but it is soon to be classified, as Michael and I have researched.
Yeah, it basically just gives you a large amount of depression and anxiety and social phobia as a adolescent or a teen. It's new, but it's a big thing.
Yeah, you're right. And that can also, do a rollover effect into your academic performance. And so one side effect that this is one side effect that we really don't talk about, or that we really don't see, but this can be attributed to the amount of time that you play the video games, the content that you play the video games, and then even like the level of which your education comes when you have video games introduced in your life.
Yeah. Okay, so what we're getting into is poor academic performance because of video games. Now, me as a casual video game partaker, I can definitely see how this could affect your academics being addicted to video games. I'm someone that plays them like an hour a day sometimes. So, and I've found myself in class thinking of what I could do on a video game. So I can't even imagine people that are addicted to video gaming, what they could do and what they would be thinking about during class.
Yeah, and a survey showed that 47% of heavy online players get poor grades, while 23% of light users actually perform better than them. And so, like, that's exactly what you were just explaining.
Video games can also have an adverse effect on health. This brings back to the playing it too much, the addicted to video games. Whenever you play something for hours and hours and hours and you're not getting that outside time that you need as a growing young person, it takes a toll on your health.
Yeah, and there's three things that major adverse effects that gaming can have on your health. And one thing can be the lack of physical exercise that the child will be exposed to. And so that can increase the rate of childhood obesity. Another thing is the opposite of that, which is when you're addicted to something or video games, you may say, oh, okay, mom, dad, I don't want to go to sleep right now, or I don't want to eat right now.
That's a big thing. There's a lot of anorexic people because of video game addiction.
Yeah. And then this can roll over. Not eating or not going to sleep can roll over to so many other things in your life, including education. And the last thing is your eyesight. The constant glare from the screen can also harm a child's eyesight for the long run. And that can be attributed to like the increasing childhood rate of not being able to see or needing glasses, farsighted, nearsightedness. So, of course, all of these things, negative effects, can be stopped. Before we go into managing gaming, we're going to go into the symptoms of video gaming addiction. And so we were already talking about the negative. So this is just going to basically continue talking about the negative things and the symptoms of how video gaming addiction can affect us as teens. And one thing that right off the bat can that can be attributed to playing video games and having a video game addiction is excessively being preoccupied. So as parents and as teens, we're going to look at this differently. So as a parent, you will see that you'll say like, okay, so if my child is suffering from a video game, they are preoccupied with the game, even when they are not even playing the video game. Michael?
That goes back to what I was saying with the in-class thinking of the game, even when you're not around the game.
Yeah, and that shows like that to a certain extent, you could be addicted to playing video games and that's one way to know if you're excessively occupied with even thoughts about it.
Another symptom is when you or your child lacks control.
Yeah. And so a video game addict cannot control the amount of time that they spend computer, if it's a computer PC game, the TV, if it's a TV game, Game Boy, whatever you play. Like you may start with the intention of, okay, 10 minutes top. Just want to play this little match and then I'll be done. I'm going to go worry about myself. But prolonging it for a few hours can show that you have a lack of control, and this impacts your studies, other hobbies, or even just taking care of yourself.
Yeah, like with me, I set a time, I look at the clock. I'm constantly looking at the clock whenever I'm playing a video game, making sure that I don't waste too much time.
Yeah, and how does this roll over into your life, Michael? So how does not having control or just even thinking about video games, how can other things in your life be neglected from that, Michael?
Okay, so other things in your life can be neglected by that, by when you're preferring to do video games over your chores or your homework. Your homework's a big one. That also goes back to academics.
Yeah.
Or even spending time with your friends.
Yeah. And spending time, and then also spending money.
I didn't think about it.
Yeah, because video games are not free. Even if you're on a PC game, there's going to be some level of, oh, I got to buy this, I got to buy that. I got to get these coins, or I got to get this dance move, to where you're constantly upgrading softwares, you're constantly upgrading packages and accessories, and sometimes we really don't care about the cost when it's something that we love and something that we are potentially addicted to. We have to have what we need to continue our love for this game.
Moving on towards loving the game and addicting to the game, you get defensive. You as a teen, when you play and you are addicted to video games, you get defensive towards those video games. Whenever someone tries to take it away from you, or you're doing something and someone says something about it, it's like an itch and you just want to scratch it.
Yeah. And so if you can attribute to any of those that we just said, it's potentially that you are addicted to video games. And to a certain extent, it's not like what Michael and I are saying, like, you need help now. But Michael and I are going to give you just some tips about managing your gaming consumption. And like, these are things that you can do, things that your parents can do, things that you can everybody can just help out each other do, so that we can mitigate the negative effects of video games on kids' behaviors and our achievements. And so the first thing, this is something that we should do in anything in our lives, but the first thing that we should do is research and know the content and the rating of the video games before we even think about buying them.
Especially if you're more of a violent and aggressive person, knowing the rating of these is just super important. The next thing that you could do is to stop installing more video games. If you're already addicted to video games, you don't need to keep on adding on to your addiction.
Yeah. And setting limits, like how long that you play, how often that you play, is something that can also help. It's because we're trying to make sure that we don't bypass this, because we know that it will roll over and affect other things in our life.
Another thing that, like we said with the time, is monitoring your video game time. You don't want to spend too much time of your life on a day-to-day basis playing video games.
Yeah, and something that our parents can do, especially if the child is very young or younger than a teen, is like talk with other people about your feelings, and like if you have like any urges, like from playing a video game, like you have an urge to hit somebody, or the urge to cause harm to a lot of other people, then talk to somebody. Let's see why you're getting this drive to harm other people, or this drive to do something that you know that is not right. To like you have enough willpower to even talk to somebody about this that can be attributed to the video game.
And as a parent, it's good to be a good role model and limit your own screen time, because your children and your teens see you on the screen. So it's like there's nothing wrong with them being on it. Yeah.
And even talking to people that you look up to, and see how they were affected by video games, and ways and like that they have like positive things and negative things that they can attribute to having screen time and exposure to games on your phone, computer, TV, whatever you play on.
And take up family time. Start an hour a day, once a week. Having family time, it will take away from your child or your teens or your own video game time, but it's better for you. It's going to make you more relaxed and calmer, and it will affect you in positive ways.
Yeah. And so that's ways that we can manage our consumption of gaming in general. But if you were happen to like can attribute to the symptoms that Michael and I talked about with gaming addictions. Michael and I are going to talk about a couple things that you can do to make sure that you do not have a gaming addiction, or if you do, these are just a few things that you could do to, like I said, mitigate the effects of playing video games. And one thing that we already said was limit your time and talk to parents. But another thing that you can do is talk to a therapist. If your efforts at home are not working, then talk to a therapist. So ask your parents to enroll you within a de-addiction program. And they actually have de-addiction programs when it comes to gaming, so that we can all be on a path of recovery.
Another good thing as far as therapy goes is a cognitive behavioral therapy. Focuses on changing the child's thoughts and feelings. It is the most popular approach to video game addictions. It involves replacing unhealthy thoughts about games with some constructive and reducing the time spent on playing video games.
And along with CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy, you have to work on it. You have to, by getting like rewards and following the rules that the therapist sets in for you, and making constant reminders to stop playing, and also be involved in other activities. And so it's all for the benefit of you, the person that may be affected negatively by video games. And throughout this podcast, Michael and I, we weren't saying that video games were bad or harmful, but played with limits, there's a lot of things that you could positively reap from playing video games. And of course, I say, Michael, you could have seen a lot, because I really don't play video games. This whole year, I've probably played 2 hours worth of video games this whole year. And so comparing that to the amount of hours that you've played, I really can't talk about the positive things that I've seen. I mean, I can talk about the things that I may gain by not playing video games, but I really can't talk about, from personal experience, things that I've seen positively from playing video games. But Michael, I know that you have seen positives from playing video games, and a lot that we talked about today.
Yeah, very much so. So like going back to some of the positives, it helps you with testing. It helps you with sometimes it helps you with anxiety. It can be both a good and a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Take it in moderation.
Yeah, moderation. That's the whole thing that we're talking about. Doing this in moderation allows for us to worry about other aspects in life. But this is also a career path that we can talk about, because Michael and I are seniors, and the technology field is something that is growing.
It's blossoming.
In every day. Video games can also aid in somebody's job. Imagine if you're an air traffic controller. You're watching a screen each and every day. You're playing a simulation that's happening in real life. Think about how you can improve so much from playing video games as an air traffic controller. Think about that.
Yeah, as an air traffic controller, as a radar man on a ship.
Yeah.
Anything involving a screen, really, you could probably benefit from playing video games.
Yep. This can also be attributed to those that are in the medical field, doing different simulations on the computer, different labs. This is so many.
This could help people in office jobs.
Yeah.
Period, point blank. Video games can, in moderation, help people.
Yeah. And so let's try to find the positives and allow the positives of video games be expressed in our lives. We talked about a lot of positives and negatives and different things that can happen with gaming, but all in all, we know that there's a lot of positives from gaming, and most Michael can attribute to. I really can't attribute to them, but we still know that they are there. And so we thank you for listening to this episode of the Teenish Podcast. If you would like to contact Michael or I, email us, thehost@theteenishpodcast.com. And you can also connect with us on social media, Instagram @Teenish Podcast and Teenish on Facebook.